You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Scott Rosenbaum.
And I'm Erica Ducey. Today, we're joined by Kara Woolsey, CEO of Mom Water, a fruit-infused vodka water RTD brand that's become one of the fastest scaling independent alcohol companies in the country.
Just to give you a sense of the brand's growth trajectory and scale, Mom Water launched partway through 2021, selling about 40,000 cases, which in and of itself is no small feat. With its relatably named products like Linda, Kathy, and Mary, 2022 saw the brand selling nearly 500,000 cases. In 2023, they pushed past 740,000 cases. And in 2024, they hit 850,000 cases, and they continue to grow.
Yeah, it's been a remarkable run so far. But, this isn't just a hockey stick growth story. So what makes Mom Water unique is the way Kara and her team have navigated the executional challenges that can crush a young brand. We're talking about co-packing nightmares, production shortfalls, launching too wide too fast, and balancing family dynamics in a very high-stakes environment.
Through it all, they've nimbly managed to stay focused, running lean, avoiding outside capital, and keeping ownership concentrated with the founding family. That's almost unheard of at the scale, especially in a category dominated by big, well-funded players.
Yeah. In our conversation, Kara shares how they made those tough calls, from prioritizing profitability over vanity growth to knowing when to pull back on costly partnerships, also to doubling down on marketing strategies that actually move product and show real ROI.
For drinks entrepreneurs, this episode is a rare look at how you can build a breakout brand without selling ownership if you are willing to make disciplined and sometimes painful choices along the way. It is a prescription that is simple, but not easy to follow. Of course, that's what makes Kara's journey worth listening to.
So let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Kara Woolsey, CEO of Mom Water. And now, a word from our sponsor. Making a great drink is one thing. Creating a brand with staying power, that's the real challenge.
Discover the secrets of brand building with The New Rules, an industry newsletter from Margaret Kerr-Jarrett and Emuna Weiner, founders of Nihilo, an acclaimed branding agency.
With deep experience in BevAlc, THC, and beyond, they're sharing the untold stories of how celebrated brands like Breeze and Hendrick's Gin are made. Learn what it takes to build an enduring brand at newrulesbev.com. That's NEWRULESBEV.com. Kara, welcome to the Business of Drinks.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. And I wanted to start out talking about your background and how you ended up running Mom Water.
Well, I don't know that I could have pictured this for myself, but the short story is that I am sister to one of the founders. And most of my career, I was in, HR roles. I did a stint doing kind of general management for like a medium-sized healthcare practice. And that was the role that I had when Bryce and Jill came up with the idea for Mom Water and told us they were going to start this business, and didn't really think anything of it. And then the original pitch to me to come onto the team at that time was, hey, we kind of need somebody to do the books. And 4 years later, here I am. Again, would never have really pictured this as a path for me, but it's been amazing. It's been an opportunity to learn immensely. And yeah, ultimately, I'm glad I took the leap of faith and came on board, because it's been life-changing.
Yeah, it's an incredible story. So, for listeners who aren't familiar with Mom Water and Dad Water yet, walk us through the brand's history and its key attributes and values.
Sure. So Bryce and Jill Morrison are the founders, and they both worked roles in healthcare. never came from the industry, had no experience doing what we're doing now. But it really came from just an idea that they had themselves. They were on vacation in the Dominican Republic and at a resort, where they have fruit-infused water in the hotel lobby. It's hot outside and everybody kind of comes through and fills up. And it was passion fruit water. And they were there. She filled up her Yeti for the day to take it out to the beach and just took it to the bar and asked the bartender to add vodka to it. And, it was back in 2018, and it was kind of when seltzers were really starting to take off. And that was really the only like non-beer canned option that was kind of available at the time. And so they get back home, they have a pool at their house and always have company over and friends over and things. And, she kind of said to Bryce, like, what I drank in the Dominican was like really refreshing. I wish I could have that. And so to start, they really just got like a flavored vodka, and she would get water bottles, plastic water bottles, pour a little bit of water out, add some flavored vodka to it, shake it up and put them in their cooler. And so that's kind of where they started. And it was really just like something that Jill enjoyed. Well, her friends started drinking it and really liked it. And then the name came about because one of my nephews got a hold of the wrong bottle in the cooler. They're a water drinking family. And he took a drink and he was like, Mom, this water doesn't taste right. And my brother was like, you really need to start marking those bottles. So she would scribble Mom on it. And her friends kind of teased her, oh, that's Jill's mom water. And so fast forward, another year or so, and she kind of starts working on Bryce saying, we should do something with this. Like, there's nothing else in the market. I don't want to keep having to like make this at home. I wish we had this available. And so, that initial response was like, we don't know anything about this. Like, we don't know the first thing about starting an alcohol company. But over time, he came around to it and they decided to start researching. So that was 2020, basically right at the start of the year. They decided they were going to move forward with this. They told our family. We kind of thought they were crazy. And they started R&D. Well, of course, COVID hits. So it took them a long time to find a distillery that could even produce, or a co-packer, because everybody was shut down at the time making hand sanitizer. So it took 14 months to get product developed, branding developed, packaging ready, and basically be able to launch product. And we launched in March of 21 in Indiana and then in Kentucky a month later. And yeah, I don't know that they really had an idea at that time that it would become as big as it has.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's keep digging into those early days a bit. So, with the mom branding, the products, they're all flavors that are named, like Susan and, all the Carols and all these different names. So did those names appear early, or did that identity take time to evolve?
Yes, confession to make. So I distinctly remember the discussion. This is before I was part of the team. This was really when they were kind of developing things. I remember Bryce telling us at a family get together that one of the ideas that they had was to put women's names on the cans. And, I'm a sister. My goal is to look out for my brother. And I was like, do you really want to do that? Like, why would you want to come up with something that right away kind of is only appealing to half the population? Are you sure that that's something you want to do? And I will 100% own that it was the right move. Like, it has ended up being our thing that no one else has done. It has made us so unique in the market. And it's one of the things I think people respond to our brand before they even respond to the product. And we've even said we could have just been another seltzer, I think, with the same branding and still been successful. But having the unique branding that's totally different and a product that's totally different has been just revolutionary. It's really hit people and the market differently. And I feel like people connect to the brand because of that, very creative approach and something. I mean, when you see a can and the first thing you see is Susan instead of strawberry kiwi, it says something. It's also really fun to watch, a lot of the distributor and retailer partners that have been in this industry for a long time, and it is a male dominated industry. I think it's funny when we talk to distributor partners and they're referring to it as, oh, well, we need to order more Karen, or we really think Linda's doing well. It's so funny to see how disruptive it's been.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it really makes sense because with the non-carbonated product, right? You're hitting that we don't want the bloat, right? And so like that is definitely as a mom, I can say that is a mom concern. And then you've
Yes.
got the names with that and like very approachable flavors. So tell me about the product line today. Like, what is it? Like, what are the different flavors, and what do you think is really setting it apart on the shelf?
So our top seller, let's start with that, is Susan, which is strawberry kiwi. I do think that combination is just so classic that that's probably why it's the most popular. It is probably also on the sweeter side because mom water doesn't have sugar or artificial sweeteners. We're not a sweet beverage. We don't claim to be. That's not our goal. We really aim to be light on flavor. We want to be sessionable and something, to your point, the lack of bloat, but also the lack of that thick kind of sugary feeling is leads you then to a different type of drinking experience. You're able to enjoy it differently. And, you can be out with your friends, you can have a few mom waters and you don't feel the same way that you do when you've drank something that's much heavier or more saturated in flavor. It doesn't kind of exhaust you in the same way. And so I think that has really responded well. We have all of our flavors. I think we have 10 different mom water flavors today. And they're kind of spread out some are offered in 4 packs. Our biggest SKUs are our 2 variety packs, which are 8 packs. You get 4 flavors, 2 of each. And I think just that variety also kind of relates to like the personalities in the fact that when you bring it to a party, people have fun with looking at, oh, okay, what 4 names do we have? And, it's just a little bit more fun and playful. And then Dad Water has 4 flavors, 4 names, obviously men's names. And we introduced it in a variety pack first, but then we now have come back and also offered 6 packs for dad, which has been great also because we can utilize it in on premise. It's a little bit easier when you have single flavor options available. So that's been kind of the second step for Dad Water.
Interesting. Well, and can you tell me a little bit about the development process? So, I think this is one of the first non-carbonated, RTDs that's lower in ABV. What were the biggest formulation or stability challenges that you had to deal with in the early production process?
So stability, thank goodness, is actually really easy for us because we don't have sugar and sweeteners. There's very little in it to spoil. So lends itself to a very long shelf life. It's not complex. It's super simple to the point that our biggest challenge early on was finding a co-packer that got the simplicity. We had a couple of nightmares where our product got accidentally carbonated. It's like, hey guys, like we really are that simple. Like we just need you to put some really good quality still water in the can and 4 ingredients. That's it. Like, so that was challenging because, in particular, early on, you're kind of banking everything on those production runs. You live and die by the inventory that you have on hand. And so that was challenging, but we really are that simple. And so that's nice because product, lasts a long time. The other fun thing for customers is the fact that you can shake up a can. It doesn't matter. You can open a can and put it in your fridge and come back to it later. And it's going to taste the same because it doesn't go flat. It already, is a flat beverage.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how is it? I'm curious in the early days, right? Like you've got, your family, extended friends, like this kind of growing community of fans. How was it that you, in the early days, put fuel on the fire? And then when did you know that you had hit product market fit?
Yeah. So I think for me, so I joined in fall of 21, right after they brought on a partner. So John invested, and to date, there are only 3 partners, Bryce, Jill, and John. And when he came on board, he said, you guys really need to go hard and fast with this. You've got something special here. So you're going to go in full time. That's when they quit their jobs. And I came on board. I was the first employee. And over the next probably 4 to 5 months, we started kind of building out the bones of, the team. We needed somebody to handle operations. We needed marketing. We knew that it was going to be marketing heavy and we needed a sales leader and those kind of things. So we started building out the team. One of the areas where we went the deepest was we hired 2 marketing people right off the bat. And at the time, it was a big deal because we didn't have the budget. And we kind of went to the owners and said, guys, we don't just need 1. There's too much here. We need 2. And as a result, they came on and kind of had that social media mindset that none of us admittedly did. And that was kind of that early key. They started a TikTok account for us. And within maybe 6 weeks of that account going live, we went viral for the first time. It wasn't one of our videos. It was actually a customer that did a review video where she kind of like acted out the personalities of the cans. And overnight, we were flooded. I mean, I think we had 1,000 emails to our info email. At the time, Bryce still had his personal cell phone posted on our website. So it was so crazy. And I think that was the first moment where we really realized like there's something here. For Bryce and Jill, in the first year, I think it came from, products sold out in a matter of hours when we launched. Second order they put in was much bigger than the first one. It sold out in a day. And so I think they knew from that it was going to be successful. But I think once they started seeing that really viral attention online, that was when the whole team really kind of realized, hey, like this is going to be way bigger than we thought.
Wow. Yeah. And it really was. It just like exploded from those early days. So, reflecting on the journey so far, what are a couple of specific moments or partnerships or, campaigns that really accelerated growth from that point on?
Yeah. So I think, we've done really well where we've collabed with similar brands or brands, especially I think for the female audience, our content really does drift very female. And I think it should. I mean, at the end of the day, though we are popular with a lot of guys and guys like the product, our branding is female. We lean into it. We're not afraid to lean into it. And so I think we've done some really cool brand collaborations. One of our top chain accounts to date is Target. And I think it's really easy to figure out why we do so well at Target, because I think that Target consumer makes sense for us. And so brands that do well there, we've reached out to, we've done some cool partnerships. We've got some sports partnerships, which we can talk about, has been, both a blessing and a curse, but the ones that we have today are nice and successful for us. They're home state based. So that was important to us to have a good presence in Indiana. So I think all of those have been really key. And then I think from a content standpoint, we have always tried to prioritize UGC. So where our users feature the cans, feature moments in their lives where they're enjoying mom water, that for me feels very central to who we are as a brand. So I think we've always tried to make sure that that content is very forward and prioritized on our channels. And I think it just works. It makes sense because we're about the community that likes us.
Yeah. Yeah. And that community is vast. I look on social media and a lot of the content and, you see like sorority parties and, girlfriend groups, wedding parties. Like you see this product really being enjoyed poolside at events. Like has such a broad occasion appeal, but then also a broad demographic appeal. And so I'm curious, what do you think it was that really helped like a younger Gen Z demographic, 21 plus, of course, to really, hop onto the brand, that they really adopted it? Because like, I will definitely say, I was at a family reunion in Vermont this year. All the 20 somethings were drinking mom water. All of them. And they told me over and over again that it was their favorite thing, that all their friends drink it. Like, how and why do you think that is?
I wish I had the magical answer for that, but we were surprised by it. Our target audience is the obvious choice, right? Like probably women my age or within a decade, both ways. I won't say what decade that is. And moms, like that to me that's the obvious answer. And then very quickly we realized as it started to go viral on social that a lot of the content coming in were people of that, just of age kind of crowd, and definitely in the university settings. Our on-premise success largely is in that community. It's college bars, it's bars in that quintessential college atmosphere. That's where we're turning the most volume. And as far as the why, part of me really wonders if it's just because it is so sessionable. I do think Gen Z in general cares more about what they're putting in their bodies. And I give them major kudos for that. We all need to do that. But I think because they care about it, and I also think because you can enjoy it without maybe feeling the same way that you do drinking other things, I think they just generally appreciate that about it. I think that they love the branding, which is also kind of strange for me, that they respond and get a kick out of like these very traditional mom names that are kind of all from like my mom's generation. That was kind of the goal. We wanted the names to really be somebody that virtually anybody would know, regardless of your race, your background, where you came from, your age. You probably know a Linda. You probably know a Susan. And so I think it's kind of funny that all of these like college students think that that is funny and relate to. And I guess at the end of the day, like they all have moms and dads too, right? They appreciate that family part. But I don't know that we would have predicted the popularity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge boom for, for the entire brand that is appealing so broadly. Well, let's talk a little bit about Dad Water, because I wanted to hear a little bit more about the decision to introduce that product, which is a tequila water, and then how you sort of positioned it and developed it so that it didn't cannibalize on Mom Water, but rather built on the overall SKU offerings.
Yeah, so great question. Dad Water has been a tremendous learning experience, I think, for the whole team, for me in particular, because with Mom Water, there was a certain amount of people refer to it as like that lightning in a can. It's one of those things you can't predict. It just happens. So then when you set out and you introduce a second brand, you're kind of having to do it the way that everyone else has to do it, right? You have to figure out how to grow something where the first time around, there were certain things you really didn't have to figure out. They just happened organically. So with Dad Water, it really started with the concept people asked at almost every event and tasting that we would do. They're like, Mom Water's great. This is so cool. But what about something for the dads? And, it's kind of a joke at first. And then as we started kind of taking it seriously, we really didn't want to just introduce a different SKU with the same product and call it Dad Water, because we felt like that chipped away at Mom Water's brand identity. It needed to stand on its own. Women needed to really have something that was made just for them. And so we were like, what else, what could we do differently, but still keep that lack of carbonation, that same kind of profile? And we really felt like, even today, I don't know that anybody's really gotten that tequila RTD right. I mean, there's some successful stories out there, and we hope to be one of them. But I think tequila is still largely pretty untapped, and it's a fast growing spirit. And I think the cleanness of the beverage too, like lends itself to, it made sense for us. So we start out, we get the formulation right. We're all really happy with the product. I think where we've had some major learning that had to happen hard was we made some packaging bad decisions. We thought it looked great, but when you put that variety pack, the original variety pack on the shelf, it really kind of got lost in the marketplace. And I think we had to go back and really fix some of that initial design work that we did. The cans were always very solid designs. Colors were very bold, but the outside packaging did not do much for Dad Water on the shelf. So, a lot of cost later, we really had to go back, redevelop. The new stuff looks great. The 6-packs look great, but it's been harder. It's been much more of an uphill climb and more tasking, because you are really just kind of from ground zero starting with this brand new baby. And it doesn't have that virality, that Mom Water did, and things just kind of magically happen, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally. And for people who haven't seen either the cans or the packaging on the shelf, can you describe what the visual identity and how the two brands differ and are the same?
Yeah, great question. So Mom Water, and we really wanted them to play off of each other. Mom Water are skinny 12-ounce cans. They're matte finish. They are largely kind of in, I'll say like pastels, but kind of that softer, female-centric color palette. And the fruit artwork is kind of watercolor. Everything's got that soft edge to it. Can tops are gold, so she's got a little bit of glam to her. Dad Water was intended to be the opposite in every way. So it's standard beer cans. They have more of a glossy finish. They're bolder colors. They have a little bit of a retro design vibe, and they are much more in your face. And then they have just that classic silver top. So they're intended to really look like opposites. And then the packaging is, I think, still very bold on both sides, because if you look at mom water, it stands out compared to other brands on the shelf. We intentionally wanted to use some colors that you don't see a lot. We have mint green, we have a lot of pink. And so those really do stand out compared to a lot of the bolder colors that you're seeing, lots of black and white and things like that. And I think that was very successful for us. People at times bought the product not even really knowing what it was. They bought it because the packaging was pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, you've been with the company now for a long time. What was the hardest day, would you say? What was the hardest day in building the company, and how did you get through it?
Oh my gosh, this one's tough. So just after I joined, fall of 21, again, kind of think about that. We're building out the team over the next few months. So my oldest brother is Bryce. Our middle brother, Josh, we convinced to quit his longstanding job, come on board. Jill's brother, Adam, came on board. John's son, Nayland, came on board. So during that 4 to 5 month period, we had family members that left longstanding jobs. They come on to the team, and I kind of mentioned we had some co-packing challenges. So, every order we produced was just enough that we put all the revenue back in to make a bigger order the next time around. That's kind of just that early cycle when you're growing that fast and your capital is strapped, and, you have to be very resourceful. And so here we were, we had purchase orders piling up. We were getting ready to launch, I think, 10 states at the time in early 2022. And we had hired all this family, and we had a massive mistake on production. And we ended up getting less than half of what we thought we were going to have on hand. And so we had this month where we had no product in our warehouse. My brother had left his job of 15 years and come onto the team. And I think it was just the weight of that responsibility and feeling like, what if we can't turn it around kind of thing? Looking back, you just have to figure it out. And that's the difference with having a small business, is that there's not somebody else always to ask. Some relationships with other brand owners and people that we can share some best practices with. In fact, you and I met at a conference where, the industry does do a fair share of trying to share best practices, but you have to figure that out along the way. And early on, we didn't have those connections yet. And it definitely scared me.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's a huge responsibility. And because also family, and you want to do right by family, and you're trying to just do your best. Man, that sounds so stressful.
Yeah. And honestly, our parents are really proud, obviously, of what we've accomplished. But at the time, it was hard because I knew they worried for all three of us. In particular, Bryce and Jill took on more risk than I can imagine. They both quit their jobs and went all in on it. And it was a lot of pressure and responsibility, but over time, I think just really made us tougher and more resilient, because you're going to face all kinds of things like that. It may not be as big of magnitude, but it's going to be things that rock your world from day to day, and you have to learn to work through them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that grit and strength is what, makes or breaks a lot of brands. So let's talk about the breaks. The big breaks, the positive, what was there a retailer or distributor or, individual who first gave you a big break that made a scale difference?
Absolutely. I have to give the credit to RNDC there. We signed on with them, and I think they had a couple of people that, got to know Bryce and Jill and the product, and they saw the spark. They saw this was something totally different. And so early on, we were offered a national contract with them. And, I know RNDC has had challenges the last couple of years, and that's been tough for them, but they believed in us when we were just getting started. And so with that national contract, basically what that did for us was when we were ready to turn on a market where they were, we could launch it. So we decided to go pretty hot and heavy in year 2. So 2022, I mentioned we opened, I think, 10 to 12 states in the spring. We opened another fair share in the fall of that year. So they were a great partner that gave us that early boost and said, we want to go big with you. When I think retail, I can remember the first chain that we got was Meijer, which was kind of that regional chain, but they were the first to have these big pallet drops of mom water going in. We had pictures that we posted, I remember, on my personal Facebook at the time, because it was it was like this big dose of reality of like this thing that we created sitting in this giant pallet drop. At the time, we were still in plastic Pactex. And I just remember what it was like to see that first display, that first big display. And that was a catalyst because after Meijer, we got Target, we got, Walmart, Publix, all these retailers started to really see the possibilities. And our chain business today is, abnormally high. We grew there faster than where we have grown. Like other brands usually grow kind of in that on-premise space. For us, chains has been our bread and butter, and it's over half of our business.
Yeah. I mean, well, so let's talk a little bit more about that. So what is the opportunity that you see still for spirit waters? Like, where can you go from here? How big can that category get?
Yeah. So one of our sales leaders was at a conference earlier this year, and the statistic that was shared with that group was that spirit waters are only considered in inception stage and only at about a 30% awareness with consumers. Yet there is far more interest in having something non-carbonated and something really light. And so for us, we see tremendous opportunity, even thinking from like a distribution footprint, chains, we're very strong. We've got a solid presence. We have so much room to grow in convenience, in on-premise, in national accounts for on-premise. Those are largely untapped for us that I think the potential is still so great. Let alone the fact that dad water is a little bit later to the game. So it still has a long way to go. But for mom water, there is so much runway. And we know that there's going to be competition. And honestly, we don't view that as a bad thing because I think the more awareness you have on the category, you help with that overall consumer awareness that, hey, this spirit water stuff it's here to stay. And it's a different option for you that's light and refreshing. So we don't really think that that's a bad thing when competitors eventually dip into the space.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just for listeners who aren't aware of the growth of the brand so far, so launched in 2021, had about 40,000 cases that first year, which was a partial year. 2022, 480,000 cases. 2023, about 740,000 cases. And then in 2024, about 850,000 cases, which is 16% growth. I mean, what an incredible run so far. So I want to talk through all the different stages as we have been so far. But, you launched in the home market of Indiana first. So let's talk about year one. What were the go-to-market choices that you made and the biggest surprises that you encountered?
I think year one could be described as survival. That was because, to your point, it was a partial year. So only about 8 months of product in the market. But for half of that, Bryce and Jill were working full-time jobs. This was done on the side and, kind of describing, again, that order pattern of you place this order in faith, believing that your product's going to sell. You put it out in the market. It sells out in a few hours, which is what happened in Indiana. And so then they ordered a second order that was bigger. They put that out. It sells out. And so they repeated that cycle throughout the summer of trying to forecast, having no idea how to, unpredictable, sales were off the charts. And so they faced out of stocks for a lot of the 8 months that we had product that year. So then in the fall, we get the big break with our NDC, we sign the contract, and that just really kind of kickstarted, okay, we've got to have a bigger co-packer. We've got to have, production plans that can support the growth. And we really felt like it was important because the product was so unique. We wanted to try to go wide pretty fast. I think there's pros and cons with that. I stand by our decision and I was a big, pusher for that, but it has created challenges too at the same time. We felt like having first to market with the concept was really important before a competitor jumped in the space. So we expanded really fast. And that leads to big numbers like you're talking about. It also creates challenges where you got to be able to support those markets. You got to have budget to invest in those markets. And so that's been stuff we've had to learn along the way. We still continued with big expansion because, again, we wanted to try to get to that national presence so that if and when somebody else comes into the space, we're considered still the original. We're the first ones that were there, and they're trying to chip away at what we're doing, which we felt like was going to be tough because our brand was so solid. So we've had to retrofit having feet on the street in our markets. That's crucial, but we didn't have that early on. And so, lots of lessons learned, but I would still do it over again because I think that it was important for us to really kind of set our feet as, this is our space. Everybody else is going to have to try to compete with what we're doing. So yeah, I mean, fast growth, the numbers that you share kind of like make me tired thinking back on it. But, it was a crazy 4 years, has been, and I mean, continues to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this is such a capital intensive business. You mentioned the one partner, and I know bootstrapping, debt. What are the other ways that you have been able to fuel the growth and the product, that you need to grow? And then what trade offs did you have to make, as a result of those choices?
So I don't think we're normal in any sense of the word in that area because the only investment into the business has been the third partner coming on board. And outside of that, we've used, I would say, like a mild line of credit with, we started with like a small regional banking partner. We eventually upgraded to a larger bank, but the size of the fund, I think, is pretty humble compared to obviously our competition. So I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of the fact that we've not had to dilute the business on, for Bryce and Jill in particular, that's my family. I want them to be able to maintain as much ownership as they can. But I think challenges that come from it is, I mean, we're outspent 10-1 at minimum by all of our competition. If you look in our category, we're measured against spirit-based RTDs. We're in the top 10 nationally. If you look at every other drink on that list, most of them are not independently owned. They're owned by conglomerates. Or if they are independently owned, they maybe have taken on a lot more capital investors. And so their resources are vast compared to what we have. The term is really cliche. Yes, we've been scrappy. I mean, I think that kind of speaks for itself. We've had to be. I think we wish we could have more sales positions in the field. We know that there's value there and we've seen it where we've added them. But we have to be smart about it and we have to only, add them as we can, unless we make some very different decisions in terms of like how the business is funded.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's such a great lesson. Just, the scrappiness and the responsibility of funds. I mean, even if you're not looking for a, strategic acquisition in the short term, but just, understanding the financials and really being responsible with that spend is something that any type of partner is going to look for, and the original founders and partners are going to need for the long term. So, let's talk a little bit about operational challenges. What were some of those that you faced? Sourcing, co-packing, logistics, all of that. What were some of the key ones that were challenges, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, co-packing, and I think probably any brand that uses a third party to manufacture their product is always going to tell you it's a challenge. You can work with the best of partners, but at the end of the day, they have other clients too. And trying to be the squeaky wheel that gets that share of time and that share of priority is so hard. And I think, that has been just a chronic challenge throughout our time. We've had some that have been more challenging than others, but so I think that's a whole piece. And I think any brand would probably tell you that. For us, just little things that I can remember in kind of the growth process, when you're small, you start off in sleeved cans. Sleeved cans are tough, and production with them is tough, and they just don't generally look as nice. And so when we got big enough that we could go into printed cans, that was a big deal for us and something that we were so happy about. And actually the visual identity of the brand just leveled up so much when we moved into these really sleek looking matte finish, printed cans. We eventually got to the point where we could afford to do the gold tops. That was something that we'd always kind of had in the back of our minds. They're more expensive. They're harder to find. So, sourcing and not just gold, but our particular shade of gold that we wanted. So then you start dealing with imports. We started dealing with times we were waiting on, a pallet that's sitting on the dock somewhere, and you're waiting for it to come into the US. Those are just things that, if you don't come from the space, you don't know any better, and you have to figure out how to find good sourcing partners, people that you can trust and rely on, which is easier said than done. I do think we got good contacts from other brands that we reached out to. They were kind enough to share like, hey, this is I think a good partner. You guys should check them out. And then you just learn how to save on materials, how to, get more efficiencies with your process and get a little bit better with what you ask for out of your partners.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what does your distribution strategy look like right now? So, how many states are you in? What channels are driving most growth? And, where are you underpenetrated? I mean, it sounds like on premise is a good opportunity, but where would you say are those opportunities for growth?
Yeah. So, I mean, your state. So, New York. We are not in New York yet. And it pains me to say that 4 years in, but we are smart enough now to know that to go into a market that size, we have to make sure we can support it. And so that's a top 5 market that's still on the table for us. So that growth alone could be tremendous. And so that's still on the wish list. We're in 39 states now. We launched 3 this year, which were Alabama, Pennsylvania, and Hawaii. And so, seeing new growth out of the launch markets is always fun because there's pent up demand that people have been wanting it for the last 4 years. So that's fun. It's exciting. We still enjoy that. To your point, as far as channels, on premise is, I think, going to be a real key for us. I think it's an avenue where if you can get somebody to try one can and they get it and they have that spark of like, wow, this is totally different. I think it's going to drive business in our other channels. And I also think that it's a way for people to engage with our brand differently. I mean, you can respond to beautiful packaging in store, absolutely. But I think, we're still family owned and operated. We still staff most of the events that we do out in the market. So when you get the chance to interact with our team and you see our unique culture and how it really is like, it's kind of like a family, that's how we've tried to set it up. And we believe our team is our key to success. And so I think when you get a chance to like share a mom water with them and stand out and talk to them and get to know them, I think that makes a big difference in how people see us as compared to maybe our competition, where they might be using a tasting agency and somebody that really isn't, tied to the brand. They're just representing the brand in the market. So I think that's kind of a little bit of our secret to success in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And how big is the team now?
41 full-time team members, which is just crazy because in year 1, I think when we finished 2021, there were 7. So yeah, it's grown fast.
Yeah, yeah. Are there certain areas in terms of the team growth that you're focused on, like, sales or operation?
Yeah, I think, we have a good solid like finance ops team. And then we also invested early on in a director of people and culture. We felt like that was, even though we at the time probably didn't really have the budget to devote to a position, we felt like that was kind of a non-negotiable for us. We knew early on we wanted to be different as a company, how we operated, how we have mutual trust and respect with our team members, and we are fully virtual. So it's really important that we think about our culture. How do you help people feel like a family when they see each other on a computer screen? So that position was very, very important, still continues to be today. Over half the team, though, are sales and marketing positions. And that's definitely where we're going to have more growth. At the end of the day, we only have ASMs in probably less than a third of our markets. So, as we continue to have budget, we will certainly invest in positions to support those markets, which I think will bring a lot of growth. We see it today. We already see the net effect of having feet on the street, out in the market that are part of our team.
Yeah, yeah. And what's working for marketing for Mom Water? What's effective at driving trial and repeat purchase?
So one of the things that we've said from day one is you cannot take yourselves too seriously. I feel like people get a little bit trapped in the world of marketing, of feeling pressured to do something because another brand did it. We really have always tried to look at it as what works for us, what feels like mom water in our branding, in our messaging, in our content. And I think that is core to our approach. That will not change. We just feel like people want to see our content and they want to seek us out because they want it to be fun and lighthearted and refreshing, just like it is to enjoy like drinking a mom water, right? And so I think we've tried to have that playful, lighthearted content. And I think that is shown in then how we reshare that UGC content. We want to see those little times where you're with the people at your family reunion and they're holding up mom water cans. Like we feature a lot of that stuff because that's who we are. And I think that's how we set ourselves apart is, showing the face of the brand as the community rather than just the owners. It's one of the reasons why, even though Jill is the creator, she doesn't have a drink named Jill. She's like, I don't want my name on a can. I want it, they did end up naming one Julie, which is kind of like what they call her when she's had maybe one too many.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any, marketing partnerships or cross-brand collaborations that have been successful for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely, as I mentioned, leaned on some like female centric or female founded brands. We've done some cool stuff with them. I mean, partners that I can remember early on where we had like really good response to things. We did a partnership with Vera Bradley. Mentioned sports partnerships. So we are partners with the Indiana Pacers. We're partners with IU Athletics. So kind of in that college and pro sports space for Indiana, we felt like it's important to own home state. There's also not a lot of brands from Indiana in our space. So we really want that to be a focal point for us. It's not the biggest market by any means, but I think there's just something to be said about wanting to own your home state. So those have been great and a great way for us to learn different ways to activate, different ways to take a partnership and then bring it to life in retail and in on-premise and use it as that tool that it's intended to be. We've also had some hard lessons learned there. I would say, I think we early on jumped into some partnerships that were very costly for us. And you get a little bit starry-eyed. I mean, if you partner with one sports team, you are going to get phone calls from everyone in that space and they're all going to want to work with you. And so I think it's really attractive to us early on to think, oh, wow, like what an opportunity. But the downside is that if you don't really take the time to think about how you're going to manage and utilize that partnership, it takes a lot of management for it to really be effective and to get your ROI. So I think we had to learn, we needed to pull back on it quite a bit. It's also hard when you get into a potentially multi-year agreement and then you don't really know how to effectively make it work, how you're going to use it and get that ROI. I think we just had to really pull back, more narrowly focus and make sure that it was a good fit for us before we would, jump into a contract situation.
Yeah, yeah. And what are the most important metrics for you in terms of measuring ROI for a partnership like that? Like, is it velocity at the venue or, nearby places where you can buy the product or, is it social media, impressions? Like, how do you think about that?
I think for us at this stage now, it's all of those things where I think early on, we focused more on the in-arena presence. And absolutely, you should see a big return. You should see the sales and so forth. But I think for us now, we're doing some really creative stuff with IU. We've also been able to kind of expand it into the Bloomington area to find a strategic on-prem partner where we can do some cool activation and sponsorship type stuff that really enhances what you're already doing then in stadium. So you're kind of getting people, you're meeting them where they are. They see you at the games, but then they see you at their favorite bar. And for us, just figuring out how we can kind of take a more comprehensive approach to the partnerships, then you see the result you get more social content. You get more, people filming TikToks when you're out and we did a really cool activation in Bloomington last week, and that's my alma mater. So it was a fun one to be a part of. We did a thing where students could fill out a postcard and we would send it to their mom and dad. That's something that really only we can do and make it be authentic. And so getting to do things like that and then knowing that on the Saturday, they're going to go to the game and they're going to see us in stadium. I think that's been very effective and something that we can pretty tangibly see, the results and positive effect from it.
I love that. And that's so cool also because like the back to school thing, like the timing of it is perfect.
And reading the messages was even more fun. Like, yeah, it was really good.
Really cool activation. Well, we talked a little bit about fiscal responsibility, and I think that is something a lot of entrepreneurs will be interested to hear you maybe talk a little bit more about your insights. Many startups are really prioritizing growth over profitability. So Can you talk a little bit more about how as the CEO, how did you balance both? And what were the financial disciplines that mattered most?
So I think really, I'm thankful that our owners had the mindset of they wanted it to be a profitable business. They didn't just want it to be a successful brand. And I think there is a difference because so many in our space, and I don't fault them for it, they may create something and it's absolutely with the intention of somebody else strategically acquiring it, right? So your path and the decisions you're going to make, they're going to be different, and the way you spend is going to be different. That was really not what they were after. It could still happen. It could still come our way, but they wanted to set up the business with the team in mind. We're hiring people, we're hiring them away from other careers. And a lot of it was family. And so they took that very seriously. And I think they just really, they love what they're doing. So longevity matters then, right? Like you have to be able to sustain yourself, and you can't do everything that you want to do. You have to make hard decisions. We would love to have a team probably 3 times the size that we have now. We can't afford to do that yet. And so we have to really think about every dollar spent very carefully. We have to scrutinize our sales and marketing spend really carefully. And we've got some great leaders in those spaces that have experience. So we did eventually bring on people onto the team, obviously, that have industry knowledge. So, but we have to scrutinize the spend because we don't have the budget of our competition. So we can't afford for a chunk of that budget to be spent on something that doesn't move the needle. So yeah, it is challenging. It continues to be challenging for us. I mean, I'm not going to lie. That's just something I think we're faced with that is tougher, being family owned and operated, trying to be fiscally responsible. There's things that we wish we could do that we just can't yet.
Totally, totally. Well, what's on the horizon? What's coming down the pike for Mom Water and Dad Water? Are there new products, new innovations, things that we should be on the lookout for?
So I wish that I could totally answer that question. But what I can tell you is this was a very soft innovation year for us. So we really only introduced our new seasonal LTO flavor, which was a citrus cucumber. It was a big deal because it was Jill's mom. That's the name. But it was a very soft innovation year. That was really our only new product introduction. I can promise you that 2026 will be the opposite. It's the single biggest innovation year we've had. We have new configurations on packaging coming. We have new flavors coming. And we have new innovation, I'll say, that I think will kind of blow people's minds. I think our team is about as excited as we've been for what happens when we maybe shake up the space a little bit again.
So we always like to wrap up asking, if a drinks entrepreneur were to come to you and ask for a resource, it could be a book, a course, an industry group, a person to follow on LinkedIn, something or someone who could provide inspiration or insights, who or what would you recommend?
So a couple of thoughts come to mind. One, funny enough, John, one of our owners, really encouraged me to consider getting involved in Vistage. And at first I was resistant to it. So for those that don't know, Vistage is like an executive, kind of like just a best practice sharing group. You get assigned to a group that's somewhere in your local area, and it's other executives in different types of companies. And you just get together, you troubleshoot, you share ideas, you share a little bit about your business. I really wasn't into it at first, and it turned out to be a great thing for me. I didn't come from the industry. I don't know that anybody stepping into a CEO role maybe ever feels totally qualified for it. How do you feel qualified for something that you've never done? So that was really helpful for me because I could sit in a room with people that had done things like this before. They may not have been in the alcohol industry, but at the end of the day, running a business is running a business. And so that was really helpful for me. And they kind of became like a group of mentors that you could go to, you could trust them to ask, hard questions that even personnel issues. If you've got questions on how to handle something, they were really, really helpful. So that's kind of on the professional development side. I would say in the industry, I would encourage people to not be afraid to reach out to other brands. We have, and we've had good success with it. And I think for the most part, the industry does better when they're willing to work together. And then we've had newer brands trying to get launched in the space reach out to us. And for the most part, we've been willing to share as much as we can because I don't think anybody should be afraid of competition. I think that we have to support each other for the industry as a whole to move forward. And I think that you learn best when you have heard from somebody who's maybe had to stumble there before. So I really would encourage people, look at the list of brands out there, look at a brand that you admire, and don't be afraid to reach out and get in touch with somebody. The worst they can tell you is no.
I love that advice. Well, Kara, it's been such an interesting conversation. I think all of our listeners will get so many fresh insights from our discussion today. Thank you for bringing the A game and joining us on Business of Drinks.
Oh, thanks so much for having me and for doing the podcast and really investing into the industry. It really matters.
And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks.
Welcome back to Last Call. I'm Caroline Lamb, joined by Scott and Erica today. This week, we're digging into a recent report from 3-Tier Beverages, led by longtime analyst Linda Zunas and Aaron McVickers, with category trends from Danny Brager. Drawing on Nielsen IQ Spectra, OmniShopper, and depletions data, the report takes a deep dive into who today's wine consumer really is, looking at topics like why wine penetration is shrinking, even as spend per buyer rises, how sparkling is attracting younger and more diverse drinkers, and what shifting behaviors around wellness, packaging, and occasion mean for the future of the category. I'm curious to hear what your takeaways were from this report.
I absolutely adore the people at 3-Tier Beverage for sharing so much of this really incredible data. One thing that stuck out to me was this phrase that came up, which is occasion over habit. And, it really resonated with me personally. One finding was that alternative packaging, and examples include like Tetra Paks, half bottles that we've talked about before on the podcast, wine in cans. It's growing, or it's at least not declining as quickly as the rest of the wine category. But in this way, the wine industry is kind of behind beer and spirits in terms of smaller or alternative packaging sizes. So they shared that only 5% of the wine category comes from packages less than 750 milliliters. And you compare that with, say, spirits, where 20 to 25% have smaller sizes than 750 milliliter bottles. I think personally, on a school night, a Monday evening, I can enjoy at home an incredible can or bottle of craft beer, or I can buy a premium bottle of whiskey and make a single cocktail. What I can't do is have a super premium or luxury glass of wine unless I want to open a full bottle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the format mix is something we're going to see more and more here. And, I think what stood out to me in this report is some things that wine producers do not want to hear, which is most wine consumers still skew older, often 55 plus, and they're higher income and predominantly white. So red wine drinkers in particularly, they were more likely to be retired homeowners and empty nesters. And while this is like the demographic stability that has defined the core of the category really for decades, it also highlights the challenge facing wine, which is that wine's base is aging. And without younger, more diverse consumers coming in, the long-term penetration will continue to decline. So I think that is like the big takeaway for me here.
Yeah, and what this report does say about targeting new consumers is that sparkling wine is basically the Trojan horse for getting the younger, more diverse drinkers into the wine world. And that's That's fun. That's kind of occasion based too, because where do you find bubbly? In celebrations and more casual settings. So that is a step that if you're a wine brand that wants to engage with that demographic, you might have to explore finding a way to, get sparkling into your lineup in a way that makes sense for you. And then we might just start exploring reds and whites too. I don't know.
And non-alc, right? This was an interesting finding from that webinar is, non-alc wine, its market share of the total wine category is about half of 1%. And you can compare that with kind of a more established category like non-alcoholic beer, which is almost 3% of the beer category. So there's lots of runway. And we're really at the early innings of the game, as it were, when it comes to non-alc wine and the expansion of that category.
Yeah, definitely. And, another point on the younger consumer front, what some data in this report indicated is in addition to sparkling wine, younger consumers, they really value diversity, they are experimenting, they appreciate authenticity. They're bringing different expectations to the table, and they're exploring things like alternative whites, the sparkling, as we mentioned, the better for you category, which continues to grow. And there's things that they do care about, transparency, sustainability. They're seeking that authenticity and cultural alignment from the brands that they support. So I think there's like a shift here. We're seeing that smart brands strategically can leverage, and it's really thinking from a customer first lens, which is like producers need to speak the language. They need to meet consumers where they are. That could be like the flavor forward innovation. We see a ton of that happening with, the Stella Rosas and Barefoot's Fruit Scotto. We see smaller packaging formats like the Tetra, resealable Tetra from Beatbox. That now I see happening, like I see so many brands bringing out Tetras right now. That seems to be like the format du jour, the 200 mLs. And, also, looking across omni-channel retail, like thinking convenience, should some of these brands be in convenience where available? Like maybe that's the opportunity. I think it's really start, rethinking as we start to look forward into what the future means for wine.
Yeah, and it might be redundant, but focusing your marketing efforts where those people actually are. I mean, I always think about your interview with Shyla Salmon from Jackson Family and just saying, hey, we're showing up at cultural events where our ideal drinker is, and they might not even know it yet, but we have our trailer and we're sampling wine. So not just showing up and phoning it in and doing wine dinners or going to the events that wine has always been, but really, really thinking outside of the box and finding where your people are. And I always tell people, you're never too small to harness your data. I think reading through this, it's like optimize it. Use tools that take your data and show you exactly where those people are. You don't have to guess. Well, I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. So as always, thanks for joining us on the Business of Drinks. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening, and tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when we drop a new episode. Please help us spread the word by clicking the star ratings or sharing on your social networking. It really helps us find new listeners. And finally, if there's anything you'd like us to cover on the podcast, please tell us. We are available at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via Instagram or LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, and we really do respond to our messages. See you next time.